Flowers. Oh, are we recording?
It's recording.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
All right, what's your preference? Crime and policing?
I'll start anywhere you want.
All right, let's start with crime and policing then, if you can find it.
Okay.
On this side, probably have tenants.
Okay.
All right, so there are the 5 big categories that I think we heard about were responding to violence, just feeling safe generally. We talked about that last time. Smoking and drinking on apartment staircases. Car break-ins and theft. That one a lot. That's like the kind of like, if it's not smoking and drinking in apartments, and just like loitering generally, people and feeling unsafe, people are like, car break-ins happen all the time. In fact, it was like a lot of folks' reasons for moving. They would be like, I have car break-ins. One person, just gonna call him T. So they had 3 break-ins in 6 months, and they were just like, yeah, I'm definitely moving to Prince George's County. That's a big one, and then theft in general. You heard one constituent talk. You were
about
there
the
for
package
one about
theft,
the package theft.
Yeah.
She said 10 packages stolen.
Yeah.
And then she talked about the cameras. She's not the only one to ask for cameras though. But we'll talk about tenants and management later, and then racial profiling is something we heard a couple times. And people connected things like racial profiling to responding to violence, because there was one constituent who was like, you know, I had 4 cars on me, squad cars, and at night, and I went to the police department to understand what the issue was like then on their end, and they said, well, we only have 12 people on staff at like 2 a.m.
So 4 people were with him.
So 4 people are with him.
Who's dealing with
the other
issues,
things.
Yeah.
And then we heard from, folks at the door. The big one that I think you and I were like communicating about and trying to email the commander about was the banging the door at night with the fire extinguisher, breaking the door, being there for a long time, and then not receiving a response back. And I followed up with them, and what they said is that they have 3 codes, right? Maybe you've heard about this. They have yellow, green, and red. Red being like, this is serious. And they call back for a yellow or a green, and they check in like later if they have other reds. And they're like, hey, what's going on here? And they said that the constituent, when we followed up with them at the door, she told us that they had called back. So I had the feeling then that there was maybe some sort of language barrier between the two, because they didn't interpret it as a red, because they did make a call back 20 minutes later saying like, hey, are you okay? She still wanted them to come. In fact, she left the whole bloody mess at her door the whole next day, thinking that the police were gonna come and check it out, but they never came.
Yeah. So, and I wonder, have you had a chance, because I know you do a lot of data digging, have you had a chance to look at what the actual crime numbers are in this area? You can,
in White Oak,
White Oak, and whether they've gone up or down, and what types of crimes have gone up or down, like those kinds of things. Do you know what the trend? I gotta be honest, I haven't recently.
That's cool. Well, in 2015 and 2016.
I'm sorry if you did.
It's in the notes, so it's kind of
okay.
If you wanted to find them and check it out, there's a spreadsheet with all of it.
Okay, I'll take a look.
It goes up a bunch from 2015 to 2016, but after that, it's stable. So I think it just changed the way people reported. I don't know what happened then, but it's not like there was a sudden spike in crime. I think the crime's always been there, and they started reporting things differently.
But it's been about
after
stable.
That, it's gone down a bit, mostly. Sexual assaults have gone up, but probably not that there are more of them, probably just with Me Too.
It's hard to know, right, with reporting, whether people are reporting more,
And it's not that many, right? There's only been 1 year of it going up, or 2 years, and there are only 12 reported sexual assaults, and it went from 8 to 12. So
yeah.
Okay.
So it's right. So that's like 30%, but it's 4, and you don't know if 4 people felt more comfortable coming forward, right?
You don't know what their circumstances were, but generally.
But tragedies for the people involved, regardless.
Yeah, tragedies
even
for people involved.
Even if it's not a huge number, right? Obviously it's.
And the thing about response times that I was talking about earlier, and this is where the hard data that I don't think people generally know about is coming in, is we're looking into, which incidents aren't responded to for whatever reason, and we can see which ones are, they're categorized by the incident. So like we know that one sexual assault was reported and not responded to at all. We don't know why that is, and we went to the police department, spoke with the community services officer, Joy, and she doesn't know why that is either. We have to go on a dispatch along and sit in the back room and figure out what that's like. So we'll be doing that soon to figure out more details.
That's great.
But it's like the crime is about stable generally. Reporting for things like, I mean, they're consistent though. It's like reporting for like marijuana and is like the highest thing by far, like 134 reports in 1 year. But those are just reports, like she told me, she was like, Joy was like, no, we don't really do anything about it. It's just.
So,
and violent crimes are high though. There's a lot.
Yeah.
But almost no homicides, just one.
Yes, those numbers I do know. So I think there's a couple things. One is, so the first question is from a policy perspective, what do we do? And so we manage state policy. Yep. And there are some state policies that are related to policing and how policing happens. And so this year, and this I'll start with some of the racial profiling stuff, and sort of police community relations and trust and problematic policing. So there is a bill, I was a co-sponsor last year, it's coming back again this year, that is just more generally about discipline and making sure that discipline is more transparent, and that officers, and some of this came out of the officer who killed a gentleman named Anton, I think Black.
Anton Black, yeah.
On the Eastern Shore. So, and it,
right.
This one. So it came out of, finding out that officer had this history that hadn't been considered in hiring. And so there's a lot of pieces that are related to like, how do we make sure that the right officers are getting hired and that they are trained right and then they're supported right and then they're disciplined if necessary. So a lot of that can be done at the state level, and there are Anton's Law, as you said, is coming back, and there's others. Along those lines, I have a bill this year that's related to crisis intervention team. I think I may have mentioned this the last time we spoke, but I'm bringing it back this year. We got it passed in the House. It died in the Senate. Hopefully we get it through this year. And it's to support best practices in crisis intervention team policing, which is strategies to respond to people having behavioral health crises, mental health crises, to make sure that they, far too many people having those crises end up in the criminal justice system as opposed to in treatment. And so CIT systems move people more into treatment. And so that is important broadly to get people the help that they really need, to keep people from being criminalizing communities who are who need help, and also to improve policing and efficiency of policing, to be responding to sort of dangerous things instead of things that should be being responded to in terms of treatment. So those are some of the examples of, and we'll continue to work on that kind of at the state level policy. Then I would say at the county level, there is a lot of work being done, and it's worth folks getting involved. You may want to look into it. There's been some legislation around community policing. Some people feel like it makes progress. Other people are concerned about some aspects of it as it relates to officers in schools. But it's worth looking into that and sharing with people their opportunity to participate in that conversation. Just because I do think that because it's at the county level and it's one police department at the county level, people could really have sharing their perspectives. So that's kind of the next policy level. And then the last thing I would say is I do think it's important for and I know everyone's working multiple jobs and kids and families, but it sort of comes back to some of what we talked about on the organizing, and trying to give people a chance to talk directly to the local community services person or whoever it might be.
Yeah, she was super helpful when we got to speak with her.
Which is great.
She gave us like an hour and a half.
Which is great. And I will say I have on other issues, the more people can communicate directly, the better, just because, often on these things people will say like, well, when you called, did they tell you this, or did you, because if the department's being responsible and wants to, address a potential mistake made by an officer or dispatch person, then they would need to know some of the details of kind of what happened, right? I will say that I know that sometimes people are afraid to engage with police at all, either because they're not documented, because people in their home aren't, or just because they feel intimidated by authority. They or the others have been abused in the past. I am, and I have with other agencies, filed complaints, sort of on behalf of people. So I'm willing to, like our office will do that if people really feel like they can't. I think the tough thing about that then is when we get additional questions, it's hard we can't kind of engage in that way. But that's not a reason for people not to share it, not to reach out, and if they provide us with a lot of details, we can pass the feedback on to agencies. And, to some extent, maybe not as much as I'd like, but to some extent agencies will listen to a legislator reaching out.
And it's cool to do things like CC you on it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
Because that's then it comes from them, they can get the response, but you can just be like...
Yeah, absolutely, CCS. And in fact, when we get CC'd on people raising the concern, we're more likely we'll track it and we'll sort of look like, oh, weeks gone by and there hasn't been an answer. Let's check back in with that agency and make sure there's an answer. So
I feel like that's one of the struggles that we've experienced, just trying to follow up on people's concerns with not all agencies, but some, like the police department. While we got an amazing time the one time we were able to get there, I had to go there in person and wait because I had called several weeks and over again and was like, I'd like to speak with a community services officer. We've been looking at this data. We've talked to a bunch of constituents and heard this feedback. I think it might be really useful for y'all. But we had to go. I went in with my data analysis guy and we sat in the office for an hour and a half, and then somebody was like, oh, we heard you were waiting. And that was the only way we kind of were able to make that connection. And then after that, I have her personal number now, but I'm still having trouble making that connection. I think it's just she told me she has a lot on her plate.
Sure, yeah.
And I know they have a new commander now. It's not acting anymore. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that factors into things in the 3rd district. But I think it's it also feels to me like there might not be, even if there's the opportunity was created now for community engagement, it's limited because of the time that just a couple community engagement officers have. And if we value it, then it almost feels like if I had to try that hard and I have all the free time and privilege to be there, I was there's if these complaints go in, they might not get answered in the same way.
Sure. Well, you should also copy me when you're asking for
I never thought about that. It was just I'm gonna show up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, and to some extent, you're doing your own thing and you guys are an independent group, but to some extent we're working together on these issues. And so it helps me help constituents if you get those meetings. So let me help you get those meetings.
Nice.
And it's on camera.
Mm-hmm. And it's on camera, yeah.